Am I audible? Good evening, everybody. This conversation is largely a conversation between an expert, Anubhuti ji, who has worked extensively on media literacy in different times with different political regimes that have been in this country at different levels in education. And I bring forth the view from ground, where my experience of working with tribal rural schools in India and what is the need for media literacy. Largely the objective of this session is to understand that what is the need for media literacy, what has changed since COVID, and what steps do we need to take in order to map this territory and find solutions. And before we begin, Anubhuti ma'am, if you can briefly share your experience in this field of media literacy, what you have done, so that people have some context.
Yeah, thank you so much. And first of all, I would like to thank organizers for inviting me for this conference. It's always a pleasure to be there in Jaipur. I mean, it is such a vibrant city. In fact, I started my career in Jaipur, and there are two things which happened in the past. One which happened in Jaipur, and second, my personal experience, which actually motivated me to work on media and information literacy. When I started my career in 1998, and was with an advertising agency, and that was the time when I was working with Rajasthan Development Tourism Corporation, RTDC. So I was working with two agencies. One was Percept Advertising, and another one was like the Jaipur-based advertising agency. And that was the point I realized that it's very important for us to talk about media and information literacy, because when we were like working on different campaigns, for example, that was the time when we were working on Rajasthan tourism, but at the same time we were working on number of products, we were working on services. So in media, and especially in advertising, the whole point is that you have to make things look beautiful than they are already. And this is what we did, and I realized that, yeah, people need to know that, when they see different products, when they see the packaging of, different products, they fall for that particular product. So that's the one thing which happened, which encouraged me to work in the field of media and information literacy. There's the second thing which happened, that's from my personal life, and I share that thing a lot with my audience, and that is, when my son was, 2 years old, when he was about to start, speaking. That was the time I was at home, I was not working, and throughout the day, I used to be with him, and I used to teach him all the sentences like, I love you, mama, I love you, papa. But, that was the time, he spoke his first sentence, and his first sentence was, "Ye dil mange more, more, more." And I was surprised. I said that, a mother is with the child for the entire day, but this is the first sentence he actually spoke. And this is actually the impact of media messages, and especially advertising on children, and of course, like on people at large. After that, I joined NCRT. I joined NCRT in, 2006. That was the time when I realized that this subject has to be a part of the school curriculum. And when we thought that we'll make this as part of school curriculum, there was a lot of apprehension among people. I mean, they said that, the students, they have to study bio, mathematics, humanities, why do you want to add another subject? But our research at that point of time said that the students, they spend on an average 6 hours in front of television. So that was the time when they were spending a lot of time in front of television, unlike today, wherein they spend a lot of time on social media. But still that apprehension was there, but we made a project, we made a strong case, and we were given this go-ahead that you can start this particular subject in grade 11th and 12th. But that was not the objective. In class 11th and 12th means that this was started so that the students are introduced to various career opportunities in media. But we wanted them to understand media. We wanted them to understand the impact of media messages. So, and of course, that was the time when there was a lot of apprehension among teachers also, because they also felt that, new subject means they have to teach that particular subject, and they were not trained for that. So after that, we thought that, okay, let's start media clubs in schools. We do have a lot of clubs like sports club, eco clubs, a lot of clubs are there, so why not media clubs? And we actually established, around 150 media clubs across the country, and that is something which did well, and students were doing a lot of activities which was related to media, and they were trying to understand, how media actually works. So this is something which happened at school level, and now, of course, like there's this one thing which is going on at CBSE, wherein we have written one book on being media literate, and that book will be rolled out very soon, wherein the students from class 7th to 9th, they'll be studying media and the importance of media literacy. So these are few things which I have done in the past as far as media and information literacy is concerned.
Thank you, ma'am. In our experience, so I come from Jaipur, but my Karm Bhumi is Udaipur, a beautiful city, but also a district which scores one of the lowest in Rajasthan when it comes to education. A lot of first generation schoolgoers. And there the challenge of media literacy is slightly different. For example, when we tested a few students cannot name the media sources through which they access information. They cannot separate an opinion piece from a factual piece. And this is not just related to media literacy. We are talking about government schools on minuscule budgets, very small infrastructure. And we saw that there is almost no awareness with regards to media. It cannot come from parents because parents are either migrant laborers or they are doing daily wage jobs where they cannot come and make you aware about it. And school teachers are already overburdened. And with COVID, certain scenarios changed. Suddenly, a lot of information was going to students through mobile phones. Parents don't know how to regulate those things. And suddenly, a new sort of challenge came to us. And so this brings me to my next question, ma'am, is why today we are talking about media literacy as an essential 21st century skill, and especially in a post-COVID world, if we are there actually, that what are the challenges that are there?
Yeah, that's true. See, media literacy has always been very important. Right now, it has become more important because of social media, because of the new technologies which are coming up, and we know that a lot of people are spending a lot of time with the social media rather than television or maybe print. But if you look at literacy as a word, literacy means the ability to read and write. And it was relevant till the time when the content was available only in the printed form. For example, if you say that, okay, people should be literate, so there is no debate in that. Everybody feels that, the people should be literate. But nowadays, people are consuming a lot of content from newspapers, they are consuming content from television, they are consuming content from social media platforms. And when we are talking about social media platforms, there are different platforms which are available. So in today's time, it becomes very important that they should be in a position to consume content in a wiser manner on all these platforms. And yes, of course, like when we talk about media literacy, it is like 21st century skill, because if you have right information, you'll be able to make informed choices. And this is something which we have seen at the time of the pandemic. There were a lot of people who fall for misinformation at the time of the pandemic. Some of the people might have lost their lives just because they fall for misinformation. So they should know how to access information in the right way. They should know like what are those authoritative platforms. They should know what is the credible source of news. So these are the things which people should know, and it is extremely important nowadays. Another thing, why we are talking about media and information literacy is that, you might have listened to a lot of journalists here, but if you look at the audience, the trust in mainstream media is actually eroding. So what people are doing right now is that they are dependent upon, all these social media platforms for news. In fact, if you look at the Reuters latest report, it says that the people who are there on, social media, 72% of them, they consume their news also through social media platforms. So this is something which is happening. And, since people are consuming a lot of content from social media platform, it becomes very important for them to be media and information literate. We also say one very important thing, there is a Mojo workshop which is happening downstairs, that nowadays every person who has a smartphone is also roaming around with a newsroom in his or her pocket. That means anybody can create content. And if anybody can create and publish content, that means there would be a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and we have to be wise consumer of media messages.
Absolutely. In this world, when the linear way of information dissemination is no longer there, talking about the context where we work, where the student doesn't have this privilege of learning through trial and error method. For example, I could learn that if I click on this, this is an ad, and if I click on this, this is a virus. And through my error, I can learn that what I should click and what I should not click. But in the context where we work, people don't have this opportunity.
Remember, like when we used to be there in the schools, we used to have in our English subject, how to write essay, how to write letter. We used to have all these things, but it's not happening right now. Have we ever told our students how to write a Facebook post or how to write a tweet sensibly? We are not doing that in schools, and I think that is something which is extremely important.
Correct. This reminds me of an anecdote, something which happened in my life while working with the tribal communities. It was time of demonetization. One of the parents went to a bank and he couldn't file the bank slip, hence couldn't take out the money. Next day, he took his son to the bank. He was in class 11th, and that child couldn't do that either. And at that point in time, I saw that disappointment in that father's eye, that may or may not get job, but he will, despite being 11 years in school, the child doesn't know how to deal with challenges that he's likely to face in this 21st century world. What are the order to prepare this child for 21st century? Because as you have said, that this is an age of information. This is the post-truth era, where there will be information overload on people. People don't have linear sources of information. How do we train people in that to access this sort of information? What are the current initiatives? And what are they lacking? Why those initiatives are not into the last mile?
So there are a lot of initiatives. As I mentioned, some of the initiatives I worked with, which means, setting media clubs in schools, starting media as a subject in school, even if it is class 11th and 12th, doesn't matter, at least that is something which can make some difference. Then we have, a lot of media literacy, clubs which are there, which I already mentioned. At the same time, there are a lot of, NGOs which are working in this direction. Say, for example, at the time of the COVID, and this is what I say, that with adversity also, like, you get something which is good. It took us this pandemic to realize how important media and information literacy is. So that was the time when a lot of, NGOs, they started this particular initiative wherein they were training children in media and information literacy. Fakshala is one initiative which is largest media and information literacy initiative in India, wherein they are actually training people in tier 3 cities as far as media and information literacy is concerned. But the major challenge with media and information literacy is that till now, we were talking about media and information literacy in classrooms, we were talking that in the institutes, we were doing a lot of research in this particular area. Unfortunately, it has not reached the grassroots level. That is the major problem which we are facing right now. And the way people were falling for misinformation and disinformation at the time of the pandemic tells that the people are not media and information literate, and we need to have more initiatives. Another challenge is of the scalability, which means, all these NGOs which are working, they are working, at a very small level. Maybe like they are reaching out to, one particular state or a district. That is something which is happening. But we need to have, one major media and information literacy program. There are countries in the world wherein they have media and information literacy policy. We do not have it in our country. When the national education policy was being formulated, there is mention of critical thinking there, which is extremely important, but there's no mention of media and information literacy. So all these things have to be part at the formal level also, and all these organizations, they have to come together so that there can be a massive movement on media and information literacy.
A direct question to what you have just said. Political regimes which benefit from people being disinformed or people not being able to make right sort of decisions, do we really see governments doing enough or doing adequate in order to do towards this goal? Because the need is now. We cannot have long-term goals. Like if we have a 10-year policy of reaching out to each household, there are people waiting to probably fish you, to take out money from your bank accounts, and people don't know about these sort of threats.
Yeah, so the government intervention is there. Say, for example, there is a national digital literacy, mission, which is Pradhan Mantri Digital Saksharata Abhiyan. So as a part of that, every person in a family has to be digitally literate. So that is one thing which is happening. But, we have understood this huge problem which, the India and the entire world is facing, which is of misinformation and disinformation. So if we have understood that that's the major problem, I think media and information literacy is an intervention for that particular thing. And definitely, yes, it's late. As I said, that I started working on this particular issue in 1998. There was apprehension then. And if you look at the national education policy right now, yes, there is no mention for media and information literacy. But still, when you talk about critical thinking, there is some scope somewhere. So it's not that every time we need to think about, the government will do something. The government has actually made that particular policy, and we have to look at and read that particular policy in detail and find out, what are the occasions, what are the points wherein we can integrate media literacy there. So that is something which has to be done by the educators, teachers, teacher trainers, and of course, like, a lot of young people who are studying media or media education.
Yeah. Just on this point, in new education policy first draft, there was mention of media literacy, as we already talked about, but it was initially omitted out of the final policy. Now we may interpret it differently based on how do we see where the onus or the final buck lies. But coming to what you just suggested, what is it that media houses and young people do in order to expedite this, as we have said that we are already late?
Yeah, I think media houses, media industry, especially news industry, can play a very important role in this. The first and the foremost thing is that they need to understand, what are the problems which they are facing. For example, if you look at the news media industry, tabloidization is one problem, wherein, they are giving a lot of emphasis on, something which is, maybe like you can call it infotainment, or like something wherein the news related to a celebrity is more important than some very important issue in our country. The problem of, the filter bubble, the people are actually given those messages, personalized messages. And with this, what is happening is that, people, they don't get this opportunity to know other people's viewpoint. That's another problem which we are facing. Just a small incident, when the rain started, I searched one thing on internet wherein, I just want to know about this thing, that why there is a pain in my hand. And it gave me maybe because of, increase in uric acid. And after that, every day I've been receiving articles from all the channels, all the platforms related to that particular thing. So this is another thing which is happening. Another thing which is happening is journalism, which means that they are depending a lot on maybe wire services. They are depending a lot on press releases. And we don't realize that, when we get information from, in the form of the press release, the major objective is, someone is trying to sell something, propaganda. So that is something which should not be done. Paywalls is another very important thing which is happening. We know that, people have to make money, but the moment you hide your content behind the paywall, what is happening is that the people who have access to money, they can pay for that, they can consume good content. But the people who do not have access to, money, they are not able to access good quality content. And this is not about, the people who are, with the low income group, they do not have access to such content. Even the children, they cannot buy content. So they cannot subscribe anything. So they end up consuming content which is very shallow. So that is something which we actually need to look at. And there are a number of problems which news industry is facing. So first is that we need to identify, they need to identify that these problems exist. The problem is that they are so deep-rooted that it has actually become a new normal. They say that, okay, fine. So first thing is that they need to understand these are the problems which exist, and only then we can, try and find out solution to, these problems. So that is one thing which news industry can do. Another thing, because I could see a lot of young people here studying in different colleges, I think young people can play a very important role in promoting media and information literacy. They can be media and information literacy brand ambassadors. My students have done that in the past. I mean, I asked 77 of my students to conduct training programs on media and information literacy in their area. And they did that. So which means we have to create that chain. And those who are studying media education, they have a huge role to play in this.
Thank you, Anubhuti ji. Any questions that we have? Yes, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Vedika. I'm from Christ University, Bangalore. So my question is, isn't the entire conversation of media literacy something that is rooted in privilege? Because as educated people, even if we don't know about media literacy, when we educate ourselves about the kind of media we're consuming, we always have the option to explore alternatives. Whereas in the grassroots, rural areas of the country, their accessibility to the media they consume is very limited. There is, say, one radio in a village or one television in a household. So even if we educate the people, even if we make them literate about the kind of media they're consuming, it still restricts their access to the media they have, because to them, whatever news, whatever media they consume is gospel. So it forms this vicious loop of where even though we're trying to make people literate about the media they consume, their accessibility to alternative media is very restricted. So how do you break that loop?
Yeah, see, I totally understand this question that, whether the people in the rural areas, they have access to, media or not. But look at the number. If you talk about number of internet users in our country, forget about television, forget about radio, they do have access to that. But if you look at the number, 825 million people in India, they have access to internet. And nowadays, they are consuming content not from television, not from radio. They're consuming content, from their phones. They're consuming content, through, WhatsApp as a WhatsApp forward. So it becomes all the more important to talk about media literacy to the people at the grassroots grassroots level nowadays. Remember when we used to watch DD News, a few years back? I was a kid then, and my parents used to ask me to sit in front of television because they felt that, okay, that's the best piece of journalism, and my kids need to watch that particular thing. People in the rural areas, they look at the smart screen like that. So whatever comes from there, they tend to believe that particular content. So it has become all the more important to talk about media and information literacy to the people who are at the grassroots level nowadays. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Hello, good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Shrey, and I'm working in a academic institution. I have been figuring out about the perfect definition of media literacy. Like, I'm very confused exactly. So what I think is, like, if someone watches a television show, a news channel, and someone is watching a debate, some experts are sitting and discussing on some topic, and if someone watches it and is influenced by different opinion of people and then makes his opinion based on those opinions. So is this an example of not being thinking right about that topic? Is this example of lacking a media literacy skill?
Okay, so yeah, I got your question. The first thing is that you talked about the definition of media literacy. There are a number of definitions. There's this one definition which I strongly believe in, is that media and information literacy, it's an ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create content in a wide variety of form. And this also includes reflect your own behavior, media consumption behavior, and at the same time act on something. So this is what media literacy broadly means. And what the question which you have asked is, like, it falls under the analysis part of it, which means if you're watching any program, you have a lot of journalists here. So if you're watching a program, you need to ask few questions. Who is this person who has created this particular content? What is the objective behind this? What is the point of view? And when you look at, 3 different channels, why is it like this particular coverage has been done differently by these 3 different channels? So one very important part of media and information literacy is that your source of news should be different, in the sense that you should be consuming news not only from one, because if you're consuming it from the one source, then of course your worldview would be limited and you'll be thinking the way that particular news channel is thinking. It should be like around 3 or 4, so that you can analyze how they are actually creating their own content. So, and people need to have those media and information literacy competency. One thing which we have to believe in and we have to tell everyone is that all media messages are constructed. And when someone is constructing those media messages, there will be element of bias in that. Whatever they may say it's very neutral, but there will be some element of bias in that. It could be explicit, it could be implicit, but it will be there. So that is something which we need to tell everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am, for the lovely session. Now
I'll speak to you later on.
I would like to invite Harjot and Sanjeevni to hand over the memento to our guests.